President and Mrs. Reagan, calling him one of Hollywood's brightest stars, said they are very saddened by the death of their old friend. Judd Rose takes a look at Cary Grant's long career.
In 1944, Cary Grant did something that haunted him for the rest of his life. During the filming of Arsenic and Old Lace, he was forced into a performance so over the top, he later tried to buy the entire movie just to keep it hidden. For 3 hours on set, he refused to film a crucial scene, knowing it could destroy everything he'd built. But this wasn't just about one movie. It was about a desperate fight to save his image, his career, and the carefully crafted persona that made him Hollywood's biggest star. Archibald Alec Leach, later known as Cary Grant, was born on January 18, 1904, in Bristol, England. His early life was anything but glamorous. His father worked in a clothing factory, and his mother was a seamstress. The family didn't have much money, and things were made worse by his father's drinking. They moved around a lot, which made life unstable for young Archie. When Archie was 9, his world turned upside down. One day, he came home from school and was told his mother had gone to the seaside. What no one told him was that his father had sent her to a mental hospital because she was struggling with depression. For years, Archie believed his mother had simply gone away, and later, he was told she had died. He didn't find out the truth until he was an adult. This secret left a deep wound, and the loss of his mother shaped how he saw the world. It also made him long for something better than the life he'd been given. At the young age, he was fascinated by the theater. By the time he was 13, he was already helping backstage at local theaters, setting up lights and running errands. These small jobs gave him his first taste of show business. At 14, Archie found a way out. He joined the Loomis Troupe, a group of traveling acrobats. School hadn't been going well for him. He had even been expelled after a prank gone wrong. Joining the troupe gave him a chance to escape his troubles and see the world. He learned how to perform stunts, walk on stilts, and entertain crowds. These skills would later help him stand out in Hollywood, but back then, they were just a way to survive. At 16, Archie's life took a huge turn. He sailed to America with the Bob Pender Stage Troupe, a group of performers who did acrobatic comedy. The journey across the Atlantic was a big adventure for the young Archie. On the ship, he even played shuffleboard with Douglas Fairbanks, a famous movie star. When they arrived in New York, the troupe performed at the massive New York Hippodrome, one of the largest theaters in the world. They worked hard, doing 12 shows a week for 9 months. The experience taught Archie how to perform under pressure and gave him the confidence to dream bigger. When the troupe's time in America ended, Archie made a bold decision. Instead of going back to England, he decided to stay in the U.S. He convinced the troupe leader to let him stay temporarily. But in his heart, he knew he wasn't going back. This choice marked the beginning of his transformation. Fast forward to 1931, he signed a contract with Paramount Pictures for $450 a week, a considerable sum at the time. However, studio executives believed his birth name didn't suit a leading man, so they decided to create a new one. After a short meeting with executives, he chose the name Cary Grant. He liked the initials CG because they reminded him of successful stars like Clark Gable. It was a small change that marked the beginning of a new life. 10 years later, he legally changed his name, leaving Archie Leach behind for good. His early years in Hollywood were far from glamorous. Between 1932 and 1936, he acted in 27 movies, nearly half of all the films he'd ever make. But most of these roles were forgettable, and Cary often felt like he was just another pretty face. Studios cast him as a good-looking but boring, nice guy, and critics weren't impressed. One director even rejected him for a role because his neck was too thick. That rejection stuck with him for years. Worse, a critic once called his acting as stiff as a wooden cigar store Indian. It hit him so hard that he almost gave up on Hollywood. He even bought a ticket back to England. But before he could leave, he met a director, George Cukor, at a party. Cukor saw something in him and gave him a small role in Sylvia Scarlett. The movie didn't do well, but it gave Cary the chance to show a different side of himself, playing a rough Cockney thief. It was a turning point. Cary's big break came out of nowhere in 1933, thanks to Mae West. She cast him in her movie, She Done Him Wrong. It was a bold, cheeky film made on a tiny budget of $200,000. Cary played Captain Cummings, a federal agent pretending to be a mission director. At the time, Cary wasn't a big name, and he only made $750 for the role. But the movie was a huge success, earning over $2 million and saving Paramount from bankruptcy. People loved his scenes with Mae West, especially when she teased him with her famous line, "Why don't you come up sometime and see me?" That role turned Cary into a star almost overnight. In 1937, his role in The Awful Truth completely changed his life. At first, he didn't even want to be in the movie. The director, Leo McCarey, had a chaotic way of working, constantly changing the script and frustrating Grant so much that he tried to quit 3 times. He even offered to pay $5,000 just to get out of his contract. But McCarey wouldn't let him go. Surprisingly, all the tension on set worked in Grant's favor. His performance turned out to be funny, sharp, and full of charm. Audiences loved it, and the movie became a huge hit, earning millions of dollars and several Oscar nominations. It also helped Grant show the world that he wasn't just a serious actor. He could be funny, too. The next year, Grant teamed up with Katharine Hepburn in Bringing Up Baby. Today, people think of it as a classic comedy, but when it came out, it was a flop. The movie lost so much money that Hepburn was even called box office poison. On set, things weren't easy either. The director, Howard Hawks, pushed the actors to deliver their lines as fast as possible. Sometimes they spoke so quickly that test audiences couldn't understand them, and scenes had to be reshot. For Grant, playing a clumsy paleontologist was a challenge because it was so different from his usual smooth, confident roles. In one famous scene, he wore a woman's nightgown and joked, "Because I just went gay all of a sudden." This line shocked people back then, but is now remembered as one of the first uses of the word gay in its modern sense in a big movie. Even though the movie failed at first, it eventually became one of the most loved comedies of all time. In 1936, Cary Grant made a bold move by becoming a freelance actor. Back then, almost all actors signed long-term contracts with studios, which decided everything about their careers. Grant didn't want that. He turned down a steady paycheck of $3,500 a week, which was a lot of money at the time. People thought he was crazy and might ruin his career. But Grant's gamble paid off. He got to pick his own roles, work with the best directors, and shape his image on screen. By the 1940s, he was making $300,000 per film and had become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Cary Grant's work with Alfred Hitchcock began with the 1941 film Suspicion. This was a big change for Grant, who was usually seen in light-hearted romantic roles. Hitchcock wanted him to play a darker, more mysterious character. Originally, the story was about a man who turned out to be a murderer, but the studio didn't like this idea. They were worried it would ruin Grant's image, so they forced a safer, less dramatic ending. The changes upset both Hitchcock and Grant. Even with these problems, Grant's acting was impressive. He made his character charming and dangerous at the same time, leaving the audience unsure of his true intentions. One famous scene shows him bringing his wife a glass of milk that might be poisoned. To make it look even more suspicious, Hitchcock put a light inside the glass to make it glow. The movie was a big hit, earning over $4.5 million, and helped Grant prove he could handle serious roles. Still, it was Joan Fontaine, his co-star, who won an Oscar for her performance. Behind the scenes, things were tough. Hitchcock often gave Joan secret directions, telling her to act scared of Grant, both in the film and in real life. This caused tension between the actors. Fontaine, already a favorite of Hitchcock from their earlier work together, felt like she got more attention than Grant, which made him angry. Grant, feeling left out, began criticizing her acting and even her looks. Things got worse during one scene where Grant accidentally pushed Fontaine harder than he should have. She later said, working with him was one of the hardest experiences of her career. By the time filming was over, Grant was so upset that he swore he'd never work with Hitchcock again. He hated how Hitchcock treated actors like chess pieces and felt the studio's changes to the story had ruined the film. At the movie's premiere, he even shouted at Hitchcock, "You've ruined my career with this picture, Hitch. I'll never work with you again." For years, Grant refused to work with him, turning down roles in films like Saboteur and Lifeboat. It seemed like their partnership was over for good, but things changed in 1946. Hitchcock approached Grant with a new project, Notorious. At first, Grant wasn't interested, but after a long talk, they worked things out. Hitchcock admitted he had been too controlling, and Grant admitted he might have overreacted. The movie turned out to be a huge success, and their working relationship was back on track. Years later, they made North by Northwest together, and this time, everything went smoothly. Grant played a man caught in a dangerous mystery, and the role showed off his charm, humor, and bravery. The film became one of the most famous thrillers ever made, especially for its exciting crop duster chase scene. When it was released, it grossed over $13 million domestically and received 3 Academy Award nominations. More importantly, it represented the pinnacle of Grant and Hitchcock's artistic collaboration. In later years, both men spoke fondly of their work together. Grant, in his last interview before his death in 1986, said, "Working with Hitch was like a great dance. We had our missteps, but when we got it right, it was magic." Hitchcock, for his part, called Grant the only actor I ever loved in my whole life. Meanwhile, Cary Grant's experience with Arsenic and Old Lace, 1944, was one of the most challenging and frustrating periods of his career. Known for his charm and subtle humor, Grant was uncomfortable with the way the director, Frank Capra, wanted him to act. Capra loved big, exaggerated comedy, wild faces, loud reactions, and silly movements. But Grant wasn't used to that. He felt it didn't fit his style and might even hurt his career. Things got tense on set. Grant argued with Capra a lot about how to play his scenes. One time, Capra wanted him to scream and wave his arms like crazy after finding a body in the window seat. Grant refused. He stood his ground for 3 hours, saying it made him look foolish. In the end, he gave in and did the scene, but he wasn't happy. He even told his co-star, Priscilla Lane, that he felt like he was ruining everything he had worked so hard for. This feeling stuck with him for years. He later called Arsenic and Old Lace his least favorite movie out of all the 72 films he made. Filming was hard for other reasons too. The schedule was exhausting, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Grant hated it. On November 22nd, he refused to keep working after midnight, saying he was too tired. Capra eventually agreed to let everyone finish earlier, but the long days left everyone drained. Co-star Josephine Hull later said, you could see how unhappy Grant was, even though he always stayed polite. Things got even more stressful on December 7, 1941, when the attack on Pearl Harbor changed everything. The United States was now at war, and Capra, who was in the Army Reserve, was called to active duty. This meant the movie had to be finished as quickly as possible. For the next week, the cast and crew worked almost non-stop, filming up to 18 hours a day. People were tired, but they pushed through because they knew time was running out. Some crew members even left to join the military, which made things even more chaotic. Even after the movie was done, Grant didn't feel good about it. He thought his acting was too over the top, almost like a cartoon. He avoided talking about the movie in interviews and even tried to buy the rights from Warner Brothers in 1955 so it wouldn't be re-released. They refused, much to his disappointment. His daughter later said he would cringe whenever someone brought up the movie. At 58 years old, Cary Grant was still one of Hollywood's biggest stars. In 1962, he starred in Charade with Audrey Hepburn, a movie that was a huge success. It made $13.5 million in the U.S. and became Universal Pictures' top movie that year. Even though Cary Grant was a much bigger star than Audrey Hepburn, he insisted her name appear first in the credits. This small but generous gesture showed how much he respected her. Also in 1962, Cary starred in That Touch of Mink with Doris Day. This romantic comedy was another massive hit, earning $14.6 million and becoming the second highest-earning movie of the year. It even broke records at Radio City Music Hall in New York, making over $1 million at a single theater, a first in movie history. After retiring from acting in 1966, Cary surprised everyone by moving into the business world. In 1975, he joined the board of MGM, one of Hollywood's biggest studios. MGM was struggling at the time, and Cary stepped in to help. He didn't just sit on the board for show. He got involved in real decisions, like helping MGM expand its hotel business in Las Vegas. He played an important role in building the MGM Grand Hotel, which became one of the biggest hotels in the world. Cary's business smarts didn't stop there. He also worked with Fabergé, a luxury cosmetics company, and even had access to a private jet as part of the deal. He later joined Western Airlines in 1973, helping the company grow and modernize. Under his guidance, Western Airlines became a big player in the industry before merging with Delta in 1987. Even though Cary left acting, he stayed connected to Hollywood. He often went to movie premieres and big events, and in 1970, he received an honorary Oscar for his lifetime of work. Frank Sinatra gave him the award, and Cary joked in his speech, "I've been lucky to be part of Hollywood's best years." Cary Grant's love life was as dramatic as any of his movies. He married 5 times, and each marriage added its own twists and turns. His first wife was Virginia Cherrill, an actress famous for her role in City Lights. They got married in 1934 after a whirlwind romance, but it didn't last. Cary's controlling nature didn't mix well with Virginia's independence, and after just 13 months, they divorced in 1935. His second marriage was to Barbara Hutton, one of the richest women in the world. The press called them Cash and Cary, but their glamorous image hid a lot of problems. Barbara struggled with alcohol, and Cary was always busy with his career. After 3 years of ups and downs, they split in 1945. Cary's third marriage, to actress Betsy Drake, was his longest. They got married on Christmas Day in 1949 and stayed together for 13 years. Betsy introduced him to LSD therapy, which he later said helped him deal with his issues. But their marriage faced trouble too. In 1957, rumors swirled about Cary having an affair with Sophia Loren while filming The Pride and the Passion. By 1962, they had divorced. His fourth marriage was with Diane Cannon, a much younger actress. Cary was 61, and Diane was just 28 when they married in 1965. They had a daughter, Jennifer, Cary's only child, born in 1966. But their age difference and Cary's controlling ways caused problems, and they divorced in 1968. Cary's last marriage was his happiest. At 77, he married Barbara Harris, who worked in hotel public relations. She was 47 years younger than him, but they stayed together until his death in 1986. People close to Cary said this marriage brought him the most peace. But Cary's relationships weren't just about his wives. For years, people speculated about his close friendship with actor Randolph Scott. In the 1930s, Cary and Randolph lived together in a house they called Bachelor Hall. They were inseparable, and the Hollywood press loved showing them in photos, cooking, sunbathing, or just relaxing together. These images, meant to show their fun bachelor lifestyle, made people wonder if their relationship was more than just friendship. Cary never spoke publicly about the rumors, but he didn't seem bothered by them. His daughter later said that Cary liked the mystery because it made him more interesting. Whether their bond was just a deep friendship or something more, no one knows for sure. Cary Grant's journey with LSD began in the late 1950s, when he was struggling with deep feelings of loneliness and insecurity. Despite being one of Hollywood's biggest stars, he often felt unhappy and isolated. His third wife, Betsy Drake, introduced him to LSD therapy, which was legal at the time and being studied as a treatment for mental health problems. Grant hoped this would help him deal with his inner struggles and make sense of his past. Between 1958 and 1961, Grant went through about 100 LSD sessions under the care of Dr. Mortimer Hartman. He described the experience as life-changing. Unlike traditional therapy, which focused on the mind, he said LSD worked on his emotions. It helped him confront buried memories and feelings, including the pain of his childhood and the trauma of losing his mother. Grant called the therapy a rebirth, saying it finally gave him peace and clarity about his life. Grant was so impressed with the results that he decided to share his story publicly. In 1959, he reached out to Good Housekeeping magazine, something very unusual for a private person like him. His openness was shocking, but also inspiring, especially at a time when mental health wasn't openly discussed. However, as LSD became associated with the rebellious counterculture of the 1960s, Grant stopped talking about it. By 1966, when LSD was made illegal, Grant had already retired from acting. He later admitted that using the drug was risky, but he believed it had helped him become a better and more honest person. In 1970, Grant faced a scandal that threatened to ruin his carefully built reputation. A woman named Cynthia Boren claimed that he was the father of her newborn daughter, Stephanie Andrea. Boren, who had a questionable background, listed Grant as the father on the birth certificate. The news spread quickly, and Grant was horrified. This all happened just as he was about to receive an honorary Oscar for his lifetime achievements, making the timing even worse. Grant considered skipping the Oscars to avoid the drama. He even asked his friend Princess Grace not to present the award, worried the scandal would affect her too. But with encouragement from close friends, he decided to attend, though he kept his appearance a surprise to avoid any disruptions. The situation escalated when Boren filed a paternity suit, demanding financial support for her baby. Grant denied the claims and asked the court to stop her from using his name. Blood tests were ordered, but Boren refused to show up multiple times. She even fled to London, all while continuing to make bold accusations. She once sent Grant a pair of baby shoes with a note saying, "You wouldn't want to be in my shoes." Grant's investigator found evidence that the child did not resemble him, and reports suggested the baby had black ancestry. This was later confirmed when Stephanie, the child in question, identified as biracial. Eventually, the case was dismissed because Buron failed to comply with court orders. Grant's name was removed from the birth certificate, but the scandal had already made headlines and left a stain on his public image. The story took a dark turn in 1973 when Buron was found murdered, her body left in the trunk of her car. The crime remains unsolved to this day, adding a haunting final chapter to the controversy. However, he loved so much his actual daughter, Jennifer. Jennifer's memoir, published years later, revealed how much Grant valued his role as a father. He documented her childhood with great care, saving photographs, letters, and even recordings of their conversations. He was deeply involved in her life, meeting her school bus every day, and even renting a house in Malibu one Halloween just to greet her while she trick-or-treated. Beyond these small but meaningful gestures, Grant also focused on teaching Jennifer practical life skills and the importance of kindness and integrity. He wanted her to grow up independent and grounded, far removed from the Hollywood spotlight that had defined his own life. In his later years, Grant took part in public events that allowed him to connect with fans and reflect on his career. His lecture series, A Conversation with Cary Grant, became a popular way for audiences to hear his stories firsthand. One of his last public appearances was at the Count Basie Theater in New Jersey in May 1986, where he charmed the audience with his wit and grace. Earlier that year, he also made a brief televised appearance, reading a message from President Ronald Reagan during a special honoring Clint Eastwood. Grant received many honors throughout his life, but one of the most significant was an honorary Oscar in 1970 for his lifetime achievements in film. This award recognized his incredible contributions to cinema over a career spanning more than 70 films and 4 decades. On November 29, 1986, Grant passed away at the age of 82 after suffering a stroke in Davenport, Iowa. He was there for another installment of his lecture tour. His death shocked the entertainment world, and tributes poured in from around the globe. The New York Times called him the epitome of elegance, capturing the legacy he left behind. After his passing, many efforts were made to honor his life and career. His hometown of Bristol erected a statue in Millennium Square, showing him in motion, forever capturing the grace and style that made him famous. In 2011, Jennifer Grant's memoir gave the world a personal glimpse into the loving father behind the movie star. More recently, in 2023, a British drama series titled Archie, produced by his ex-wife Deanne Cannon, explored his life story, continuing the fascination with the man behind the Cary Grant persona. His legacy remains a blend of on-screen brilliance and the quieter, more thoughtful life he lived behind the scenes.